thank you very much for the introduction. And I will not so much talk about really my work or about ecosystem services, but I will more talk about what Hannah was talking about in the late part of her presentation, the interaction between policymakers and research. Because that is always quite difficult. As researchers, we produce lots and lots of interesting new knowledge. And it's so frustrating that it's so difficult to make policymakers use this knowledge in making better decisions. And I will talk a bit about how this is an example of how policymakers and researchers can work together. And it's called Agrifood Economic Center. And what I will do is that I will speak a bit about who we are, what we do, and some lessons that we have learned along the way. And I start with the mission that we have. We are researchers, and we are part of the universities, but we have a slightly different mission than universities traditionally has. And the Agrifood Economic Center aims at bridging applied science and policy. In a complex and rapidly changing world, we provide policymakers with independent and scientifically supported analyses. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Sweden became a member of the European Union. And at that time, we were in the process of reforming our agricultural policy. And we thought this was a very good idea because we have, like many other countries, a very complex policy, and we have decided to get rid of it. And then we became members of the European Union with an even more complex policy. And policymakers from Sweden, they went to Brussels and said, hello, we have a very good idea. Let's take everything away. Let's reform the policy. And well, you can imagine the reaction in Brussels. People were not very happy about this. They said, well, what kind of analysis do we have? What kind of background information? We need this kind of policy. So where's the proof? Do you have any scientific background to claim what to back up your claims? And the policymaker said, well, not really. So they went home, and as the common agriculture policy is very complex, there is a lot of support. Sweden is reform-oriented, and we had this need for policy-based analysis. It was decided that we should create some kind of organization that will help to provide this analysis. And it's mainly economic analysis because it's about policy and how to improve policies. So, what happened was that the government decided to commission some kind of organization. It started with a government authority, but it then turned out to be a commission to two universities. It was the Lund University and the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. And we were asked to provide mostly information on the common agricultural policy. How can it improve? How can we reform? How can we make the policy better in different ways? And it started with the Ministry of Agriculture, but that ministry was well, kind of reformed and placed into the government, into the Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation. So currently we're working with the Minister of Enterprise and Innovation, where issues related to agriculture policy are right now. So our research area was from the beginning agriculture and agriculture policy. And then we had all the food scandals with foot and mouth disease. We have the crazy cow. What's the English word? Mad cows, thank you. The mad cow disease. So from not just being an agriculture policy focusing on producers, we were also interested in consumers. So our mandate grew from agriculture to consumers. And then also we had rural development. And the final part that we are working with is fishery, because we also have a common fishery policy with many problems that are similar to agriculture, because we have depletion of fishery resources, and we have a very complex policy trying to deal with this, and we need economic analysis to make the policy better. Okay, so these are the research areas that we are working in. And we are researchers from 2 universities. We are all economists, and we are together, say, 17 people. And most of us are located here in Lund, working together. So the 2 universities are working very closely together. And we are also working very closely with the ministry, because the work we do are based on issues that the ministry are interested in. That is one part. We also have our own projects and ideas that we do, because quite often the people working at the ministry, they can be very short-sighted, and they are, if you ask them, well, what kind of information would you need in a year or 2, it's sometimes quite difficult for them. So we try to look ahead also, and to start our own projects that are more far away looking. And we also have external projects, and that could be working together with other researchers, with traditional like research funds, or commission projects for other organizations. And we interact very closely with the ministry. We have a yearly project plan that we meet in December and discuss. And they never tell us what to do. They have like suggestions. And we always have a discussion. Is this something we can do? Is there anybody else who can do it better? Or does it fit with the competence that we have? And this discussion is very good, because first of all, we have a lot of good input, because the questions that are important for them are not always the same that are important for researchers, so we get many good ideas. Also, when we are done with the project, if they initiate the issue, they are often very interested in hearing about the results. So it's so much easier to come with the results when they have been on board the full time. Also, we have regular meetings and we have seminars. So when we are done with the project, we present the results at the ministry and we have discussions. And then we write traditional articles like researchers do and publish them the traditional way. But we put a lot of emphasis on writing policy briefs in Swedish that is comprehensible for like the average policymaker that do not have a background in economics or is not a researcher, so that it should be very easy for them. And we also work with press release to reach a wider audience. So, what have we learned so far? Here we have somebody working at the, well, he is a researcher, but it's because I took the picture from the photo bank here, but he's supposed to be somebody working at the ministry. They are like running around with coffee, there's a lot of lots of meetings, and there is so much happening. And the minister, he says like, well, he says something in the media and they have to react, and there's a lot of like short-term things happening all the time. Okay, and this is what they get from us. there is never ever time to read a research article. Sometimes when I talk to them, they are like, well, it's so sad. I really wanted to like continue to be updated in my area, but I can't because there is no time. So we have a problem here. So if we look at the government bureaucrat, they're often very skillful. It's difficult to get the work there, so they're very well educated, they are skillful, they are hardworking, but they are not researchers. They have a broader knowledge. They have no time. Everything has to happen very quickly. And for them, what's important is relevance. It has to be usable now and for the important questions that the minister is asking about. So that's the situation for the people that we try to reach. Okay, and the researcher, well, we are specialists. We also have lack of time, of course, because it's important, and we have focus on academic publications. So we have two very different realities here. And as a researcher, we generate the knowledge, and we kind of think of, well, here's the knowledge, please use it. I've published it, you can find it, it's easier to find. But we very often underestimate this gap between research and policy. So we have to try to close it. And by working the way we do, it's actually quite helpful, because we are so much closer to policymaker, but it's still very, very difficult. So, how can we try to close this gap between policymakers and researchers? Well, the most obvious part, of course, is try to present our results so that a generalist with no time and focus on relevance can understand it. And that is very different from a traditional article, because when we write an article, we look at what's the previous research, what's the method we use, and what are the results that we obtain. And we cannot write something for a bureaucrat in this way. We need to do it completely differently. So if you want to write a good policy brief, well, it must be possible to understand. We can't use the traditional wordings that we have. We need to have like simple language and to really like point to the results. We also need to put it in the fuller context, because as was mentioned earlier, we have many articles with one little piece of evidence, and we have to take them together. So we need to put things in a context. And we also must show them how can this be useful. All this kind of new research, how can it be applied in making better policies? We need to make that translation for them, because they don't have the time or the knowledge always to do that by themselves. So, a lot of work to write a good policy brief. Also, what's very interesting is the choice of research question. As I mentioned earlier, if you talk to the people before you start, it's easier to come back with the research results. And what is quite often happening in research, that is that we are looking here. If we are going into one question, we see, or one issue, we see what has been done before. Well, this is the area that has been researched, and we all, as researcher, we often try to go a little bit further. We look at what has been done, and we try to like put some extra lights up here in the row. But when we talk to policymakers, they often have a question that is kind of like far out in the forest, where it's totally black, nothing is done. And that's, I don't know how come, but as researchers, we quite often start, this has been done, we need to continue. We not that often do we start with interesting questions. But actually, while speaking to policymakers, they very often have interesting questions. And being out there in the forest, it's actually quite fun, because you have to like, how shall we do this? You need to start thinking, like, what kind of methods can we use? How can we cooperate with other researchers? How shall we do this? Also, the relevance is there automatically, because those are important questions that there are actually no good answers to so far. So it's actually quite rewarding to listen, and not just to try to communicate one way what we are doing, but to listen to their concerns and the questions that they have. So, altogether, what I will say that some of the lessons that we have learned working this way is that you need to put in a lot of extra work to deliver results that are comprehensible for the one that is supposed to use them. You need to go much longer than to just publish an article. And some policy briefs that we have been looking at, they are like they are as complicated as the original article, or they tend to describe just the project as such. But you need to really lift how can this be used? What is interesting? What's the policy relevance for them? And as I say, engage in two-way communication and cultivate long-term relationships. When we first started, we thought that it would be very easy, because we were so close to policymakers, we can just present them with all this good research, and loads of things would happen. And almost nothing happened, because there were always some political reasons to not use the new knowledge, because the minister wanted to do something, because voters thought it was a good idea, and so on. So it's a bit frustrating when you are close or closer to the process. But what we also have learned that if you have a long-term relationship, over time you can help to change and help to make policy better. But it takes time. It's definitely not done quickly. And it's finally also important with timing, because when big issues are like the common agriculture policy, when the reform is up, well, then is the time to come with all the research that is important for the reform. But if you are too late, it's like there is a new question and nobody will be interested. So timing is always an issue. So, yeah. And a nice and friendly cow at the end. So that was just about a little bit how we've been trying to work, and it's one example of how to make a closer link between research and policymakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.